Again, this will be Zoe Rosenberg. She is a 16-year-old animal rights activist, founder of the Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary, and an ad organizer for the Grassroots Animal Liberation Network, Direct Action Everywhere. Zoe travels the country giving speeches on behalf of animals, and most notably, in October of 2017, she gave a TEDx talk at the age of 15. Please help me in welcoming Zoe Rosenberg.
So the title of my talk today is Why the Animal Rights Movement Will Win. So 6 months ago, I was arrested for chaining myself to the slaughterhouse chute at Cal Poly University in an attempt to save a baby cow who I named Justice. Now you may be wondering what this has to do with why the animal rights movement will win. Well, the reason is that I am not the first person to chain myself to something in defiance of an unjust system. In fact, far from it. Because while I may have been chained to the slaughterhouse chute 6 months ago, there was a woman who 104 years earlier, in 1914, was chained to the railings outside of Buckingham Palace in London during the fight for women's rights. Now, when I did this action in April, I received thousands of messages of support from people like all of you. But I also received hateful messages, violent messages, and even death threats. That may make animal rights seem hopeless, that there are actually people who would hate on a then 15-year-old girl for trying to save a baby cow. But let's go back to the actions of this woman and the actions of other suffragettes. While she may have been supported by thousands, she was also hated. She also received hateful messages, violent messages, and yes, even death threats. In fact, many women were assaulted and even killed during the fight for the vote. And just like people told me and people tell me that my fight was and is hopeless, people laughed and told her that women's rights was bound to fail. But they were wrong. And one thing that many people don't know about the women's rights movement is that it wasn't even supported by most women. We think about the movement and we think it's, 50% of the population against another 50%, but that wasn't the case at all. In fact, a lot of women actively opposed suffrage and would counter-protest women's rights events. And there were also some women who supported suffrage but were vehemently against activism. They wanted women to just sit still, not rock the boat or make themselves look bad. Just hope that maybe, possibly, someday, the vote might just be handed to them because the government would totally do something like that, right? It took years for women's rights leaders, such as Alice Paul and Emmeline Pankhurst, to rally their supporters to action. But once they did, they were unstoppable. Once they did, the political climate around women's rights changed rapidly. And through strategic, direct action, they won. And the women's rights movement is far from the first movement to win, despite being deemed as controversial and being deemed as doomed to fail. I can list countless examples. From the Jews in Egypt, to Mahatma Gandhi's salt marches, to the gay rights movement of the 21st century. Only 200 years ago, very few thought black people would ever be free. Just 100 years ago, almost no one thought women would ever be given the right to vote. And just 30 years ago, no one believed that marriage equality would ever be a reality. And today, very few people think that animals will ever be given the rights that they deserve. Very few think that animals will ever be freed from the prisons we have forced them into. And I am here today to say that just like everyone who has expected movements in the past to fail was wrong, everyone who is expecting the animal rights movement to fail today is wrong. They're wrong. Because the animal rights movement will win. And here's why. Reason number 1, we have the power of the people. Corrupt organizations can never inspire the people. They can never inspire a movement. And in the end of the day, it is the people who have the power. It is the people who can give power to leaders, and it is the people who can take it away. It is the people who can give power to institutions, and it is the people who can take it away. And most importantly, it is we, the people, who can give power to ourselves. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And we have seen this so many times throughout history. In fact, research by social scientist Erica Chenoweth has shown that no movements have failed after mobilizing 3.5% of the population to sustained, nonviolent action. Let's take a look at Occupy Wall Street. While somewhat unsuccessful for reasons I won't dive into today, Occupy Wall Street was one of the most successful movements at inspiring the people. Thousands marched the streets. Thousands camped out for weeks. Thousands risked their lives and their freedom to protest financial inequality. Now, do you think the big banks could have done the same? Sure, maybe they could have paid a couple people to counter-protest, but thousands? And would they have had people willing to make sacrifices, such as being assaulted and arrested by the police? No. Now I'm going to share with you all 2 stories. This is Stanley. Stanley is a billionaire. So I should clarify, this is a fictional hypothetical story, and then I'll tell you afterwards a true story. So Stanley is a billionaire. Stanley owns one of the largest factory farms in the world. His farm houses hundreds of thousands of pigs. He never visits this farm. He doesn't even live in the same state. He sits at a computer in his house and just thinks about marketing strategies all the time. He doesn't have any connection with any of these pigs. He has minimum wage employees who he pays to do all of the work for him. And one day he goes on Facebook and he sees that he's received a message from one of his friends. It's a link to a video from an animal rights activist going into his farm and, as from his perspective, stealing one of his piglets, who they say was sick and dying, and who they say they rushed to emergency veterinary care. The footage shows pigs that are apparently dying, drowning in their mother's feces and blood. It shows thousands of pigs in gestation crates. It shows giant pits of manure, urine, and blood. And Stanley is pissed because these activists might just cut into his profits. So he responds. He says that he is doing everything right, that his facility is USDA approved, and that gestation crates are the most humane way to house pigs. Now for the true story. This is Lily. Lily was rescued from one of the largest factory farms in the entire world, a Smithfield factory farm. Activists found her on the brink of death. She was drowning in feces and blood. She could barely walk. Her hooves were so severely infected, and she was in severe pain. And the activists took her out, and they rushed her to the emergency veterinary room. No one was sure if she would make it, but after many, many hours of intensive care, Lily did recover. And now she's living a happy life at an animal sanctuary, where she's free. She gets belly rubs, bananas, and kisses. Unfortunately, because of the way Lily was genetically manipulated by the food industry, by this factory farm, she may suffer from health conditions in the future, such as arthritis, because she was being bred to grow so much faster than she naturally should. I've seen this with my pigs at home. In fact, one of our pigs has epilepsy, where she seizures if she ever misses her medication. Now, if you had to choose who to fight for, Stanley, the billionaire who's a bit concerned he might lose some of his profits. Or Lily, the piglet rescued from the brink of death who needs your help. Who would you choose? If you're like the majority of Americans, you probably choose Lily. And that's because corrupt institutions, animal agriculture, and other animal exploitation industries included, have money. That is the bulk of what they have. And money, as desirable as it might be, is not inspiring. It does not give people a true purpose to live. It does not drive people to risk their lives, risk their freedom, risk everything for what they feel is just. But what's right does, which brings me to reason number 2. We can maintain the moral high ground. We get to decide our own actions. And we are lucky because we have access to so much history. We can look back and determine why just about every single social justice movement that's failed has failed. And most of the time, it's because the activists become disempowered, lose hope, become afraid, or become too caught up fighting amongst their allies. Alternatively, it is because the movement becomes depicted as violent. And the industry may take actions to divide us, to hurt us both physically and mentally. We may face violence at their hands, but we get to decide how we let them affect us. We can stand strong, holding our values near and dear, and keep pushing forward. I'm going to share with you all an example of a movement of people who not only overcame their struggles, but used their struggles to create even more momentum for their cause. So let's jump to Black Friday of 1910, where over 300 women began to peacefully march towards the House of Commons in an attempt to deliver a letter to Prime Minister Henry Asquith in support of women's rights. Unknown to the women, the police had been given orders by the government to treat the women with severe brutality. And so as the women approached, the police beat the women. They kicked the women. They pushed them to the ground. And women sustained injuries so severe that 2 even died. Over 100 peaceful, unarmed activists were arrested and thrown in jail. And in this situation, the women's rights movement had a few choices. One, they could decide to become afraid. They could hide in fear of another event such as Black Friday occurring. They could essentially give up. Number 2, they could do to the police as the police had done to them. They could kick them back, punch them back, kill them back. They could essentially lose their moral high ground. Or number 3, they could remain nonviolent and keep pushing forward. They could show the world that these peaceful women were being treated with so much violence at the hands of the government. And by maintaining their moral high ground, they can make it clear to the public which side of history they want to be on. Do they want to be on the side of the government that's being violent? Or do they want to be on the side of the women who are peacefully fighting for what's just? And that's exactly what they did. They maintained their moral high ground. And because of this, thousands of people who were previously unsure where they stood on the issue of women's rights became supporters and even advocates. And this is all because of the actions taken by the WSPU, the Women's Social and Political Union, after and during the demonstration. Another example of a movement of people who successfully maintained the moral high ground is an Occupy Wall Street protest in Davis, California. Dozens of nonviolent activists were sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk, linking arms to protest financial inequality. To everyone's shock, to the whole world's shock, one of the police officers got out a giant bottle of pepper spray and began to walk around one by one, spraying all of the activists in their faces. And the activists just sat there, barely moving. In fact, The only time they moved was to turn their heads towards the ground to avoid getting the chemicals in their eyes. And videos of this demonstration went viral. The world was outraged. UC Davis took actions to remove all information about this event from the internet. But the activists stood strong, remained nonviolent, and shared their truth. And when the public saw the actions taken by the police, the actions taken by UC Davis to cover up the event, and the actions taken by the activists, they sided with the activists. And so, in cases where we are faced with violence and brutality, we must react with nothing but compassion in our hearts. And here's the thing. Corrupt organizations, animal agriculture and animal exploitation industries especially, cannot maintain the moral high ground, even when they do treat our activists with compassion and respect. Because the thing is, in the end of the day, they have nothing to maintain. Because they are the ones stealing lives, denying people their rights, and spilling blood. And we are just protesters executing our First Amendment rights. And as long as we remain nonviolent, it is incredibly difficult for them to turn the tables against us. And so, as long as we remain compassionate, even if somebody comes up in your face and tries to punch you for speaking up for the animals in need, you must show them nothing but love. And as long as we do, we can and we will maintain the moral high ground. Reason number 3 that the animal rights movement will win is that we have the truth on our side. Animal agriculture, their words are filled with lies and false realities, while ours are filled with truth. The agriculture industry has blatantly lied so many times, and we have proved that their lies were lies so many times. And then sometimes when we release information exposing their fraudulent lies, they try to make it out that we're lying, and they do so by telling even more lies, which we then once again prove are lies. For example, 2 years ago, we at Direct Action Everywhere released an investigation at that giant Smithfield farm, one of the largest factory farms in the entire world, where Lily came from. We had virtual reality 360-degree footage of this facility, showing thousands of pigs, rows and rows of gestation crates. We had virtual reality drone footage of above the farm, showing an air view. We could show everyone all of the sheds, the giant sheds, and the giant feces pits, filled with manure, urine, blood, and dead piglets. And when we released this footage, Smithfield said that our investigation was staged. There is no way anyone could have staged something like that without millions of dollars in a production budget. And you can just look at our finance records from Direct Action Everywhere that year, and we did not have anything close to that, I can assure you. So that's what we said. And of course, Smithfield looked ridiculous, because it was obvious that they had lied. And it was obvious that they were lying to cover up the cruelty, because there was nothing else they could say. And the industry has come up with labels such as certified humane, organic, cage-free, free range. They're trying to convince people that things have changed, that animals are being treated better now. But we've investigated those farms too. We've showed people that those facilities are just as bad and a lot of the time even worse than the average facility. For example, free-range eggs or cage-free eggs or pasture-based eggs actually have significantly higher rates of cannibalism and death than the cage facilities. And as someone who's worked with chickens, I actually believe that those facilities are significantly more cruel. Obviously, they're all horrible, but I think they're significantly more cruel. And the thing is, when we expose those lies, that they're just covering it up and covering it up and covering it up, We're proving one more truth, that at the end of the day, there is no humane way to use an animal. And more importantly, we prove that there is no humane way to kill someone who does not want to die. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, I was at the farmer's market in my hometown, San Luis Obispo, where I live, and I was doing outreach. I was, showing people footage with Anonymous for the Voiceless of what happens to animals in factory farms and slaughterhouses. And a woman recognized me from my campaign to shut down the Cal Poly slaughterhouse, and she came up to me and asked me why I've been protesting. So I told her that I'm protesting because they electrocute pigs in their spinal cords and brains and stab them to death, because they slit chickens' throats, and because they shoot cows in the head. And I told her that this brutality has no place on campus, on any campus. And then she revealed to me that she was an animal agriculture student at Cal Poly, and that she had taken those classes, and she had seen it firsthand. And she looked at me and she assured me that that was the most humane way to kill an animal. So I asked her a genuine question. Is there any humane way to kill someone who does not want to die? And she said, I don't have an answer to that, and quickly walked away. Even an animal agriculture student was forced to confront that her beliefs were flawed, that they were quite frankly lies. Because the truth is that we have the truth on our side, and in the end, the truth always wins. Reason number 4 that the animal rights movement will win is that we have a plan. At Direct Action Everywhere, we have developed a 40-year roadmap to animal liberation, a step-by-step plan to create a better world, a world where animals are treated not as things, not as property, but as the individuals, the living beings that they are. We've created this plan with the help of world-renowned social change scholars, and we also created it with the help of history. By looking at past movements, we've been able to learn a lot about strategy. One of the people who helped us when we were creating this plan is Evan Wolfson, a pioneering gay rights activist. 40 years ago, Evan Wolfson made a shocking prediction. He said that within one generation, marriage equality would be a reality in the entire country. And everybody laughed at him. The majority of Americans didn't take him seriously. No one believed it. Everyone just thought marriage equality would never be a reality. They thought he was a joke. But he was right. Today, marriage equality is indeed a reality in the entire country. And just 2 years ago, Wayne Shung and all of us at Direct Action Everywhere made a prediction of our own. We said that in 40 years, the last slaughterhouse on earth would shut its doors. And we believe that we can make this happen. And a lot of our plan involves converging in Berkeley. The city of Berkeley has been a leading city in many social justice movements, and we believe that it can be the same for animal rights. Here's a brief outline of how the 40-year roadmap goes. Year 2020, an animal rights hub develops in Berkeley, and a global network comes into place. Year 2025, meat is banned in Berkeley, and open rescues occur across the world as animal rights culture spreads, and there is a strong discussion to end state and federal subsidies for animal agriculture. Year 2030, some former heads of state, such as the Clintons, Obamas, the Pope, etc., publicly support open rescue, research-based activism to reduce animal consumption, more protections for many species, and ending the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act and other laws protecting animal industry. Year 2035, more city and regional level animal protection laws and animal product bans are instituted and enforced globally. Year 2040, a state or province with seed cities passes a statute of animal liberation with a robust enforcement agency. Year 2045, one or more national governments fund a network of sanctuaries as reparations. Year 2050, species equality goes before the supreme or constitutional courts of one or more countries. Year 2055, a constitutional bill of animal rights passes in one or more states or countries. And year 2060, animal liberation. We believe that with this concrete step-by-step plan, we can and we will make it a reality. And between each of these goals are smaller goals, smaller details, and strategic notes that will help us get there. But we do have full faith that it will happen. Which brings me to reason number 5. The moral arc bends towards justice. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Those are words by Martin Luther King Jr. Now, the majority of Americans are opposed to slaughterhouses. In fact, 47% of Americans would support a ban on all slaughterhouses. 53% of Americans would prefer to eat animal-free meat, and 33% of Americans would support a ban on all animal farming, all of it. These statistics are truly groundbreaking. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to the compassion that most individuals hold in their hearts. We live in a nation of animal lovers. Even people who love animals don't want to see them hurt. Even people who eat animals don't want to see them hurt. They love them, or at least they believe they love them and care for them. In fact, in 2016, 50% of dog caretakers bought their dogs Christmas presents. These people eat animals, but they're buying their dogs Christmas presents. People don't even want to imagine animals hurt. They don't want to see it. They don't want to face it in any way, shape, or form. In fact, earlier this year, I did a demonstration outside of a Whole Foods in San Luis Obispo. And we filled up a blender with fake baby chicks, and we added some fake blood in there. And we went up to people, asking them if they would turn it on. We were trying to highlight the fact that baby roosters are ground up alive in the egg industry because they'll never produce eggs. And with every single person we approached, I would say just about every single one was disgusted, beyond disturbed. They were angry and they looked at us in horror. And they definitely did not want to turn the blender on. And these were fake baby chicks. Now, I know that saying the moral arc bends towards justice may sound like a spiritual concept, not a scientific one. But I honestly don't believe that's the case. Because it is sentient beings, humans and non-humans included, who control the moral arc because we are the ones who have morals. And from all of the time I have spent talking with people, including people within the industry, including people who work on slaughterhouses, who slit animals' throats for a living, from all of the time I have spent taking care of animals at my organization, Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary, I believe that everyone's values tend to bend towards what's right. They tend to bend towards justice. And what that means for the animal rights movement is that the odds are already in our favor. We just have to fight and pull that moral arc until justice is won, until animal liberation is won. Now, the last reason I'll be talking about today that the animal rights movement will win, the most important, in my opinion, the most important reason that the animal rights movement will win is you. All of you are the reason that the animal rights movement will win. Because I know that each and every one of you are here today because you care. Because you want to see a better world. A world where chickens, instead of spending their lives in cages and having their lives cut short by metal blades, live free, run in the grass, bathe under the sun, and never have to fear for their lives. Free from exploitation. We want all of these animals to be, right? We don't want cows to be dragged to the kill floor. We want them to be running with their families, grooming their children. We don't want pigs to be hung up by their legs and stabbed to death. We want them to be rolling in the mud, rooting in the soil, snorting with happiness. We want a better world, a just world, a kind world, a world where humans and non-humans walk side by side in peace. And I know that with your help, with all of your help, if we all join together and we all fight, we can and we will make that world a reality. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so the question was, what motivated me to become vegetarian, vegan, and an animal rights activist with a sanctuary and everything? So I went vegan about, I guess it was like 6 years ago now. And I went vegan after my family got chickens. And I fell in love with them. I grew up a vegetarian, so I never really understood the concept of eating animals. It was always just really bizarre to me. But I still was a very speciesist person. I mean, I think all of us, even those of us who are vegan, we're still speciesist in a lot of ways. But, I'd been raised in the society, just like all of you, that taught people that chickens were stupid, right? That the chickens were just these dumb birds and, their lives maybe mattered less than us. But when I got chickens and I started to spend time with them, I just fell in love with them, and I realized that they were individuals, that they had feelings, that they felt fear, pain, love, joy. And I realized that they were just the same as the dogs and cats that I had grown up with, that they were just the same as me in all of the ways that mattered. And I remember one time one of them got sick when she was a little baby. Her name was Popcorn. And I was devastated. She was severely ill. We were taking her to the veterinary hospital every day. We were spending countless hours trying to take care of her. And I was online doing research, trying to figure out how we could save her. And while doing this research, I came across a website that would change my life forever. It was a website called NSW Hen Rescue in North South Wales, Australia. They go into factory farms. And they go and they take hens who are on death's row and take them out of these cages and bring them to sanctuary and find them loving forever homes. Their work is absolutely incredible. And so I emailed the founder of this organization, Catherine, and I asked her how I could start a chicken rescue of my own. I was already basically going vegan at this point because when I saw all of their videos. And Catherine sent me so much advice. She told me how to talk to farmers to get them to give us animals. And she also told me about how they get chickens by just literally walking in the middle of the night and taking them out. And I was just so inspired. And I asked my mom one day if we could start a chicken rescue. She wasn't really expecting this question, so she said maybe. And I was expecting a no. So I was pretty excited. And I decided to sit down and get to work. And I called the organization Happy Hen Chicken Rescue. And I spent over a month working on a website, starting a Facebook page, getting everything together. And finally, my mom agreed we could go to the local egg farm and rescue 12 hens. And then we just kept rescuing more and more and more. And then we moved beyond chickens. And now we're Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary. And we've saved a lot of lives and shared their stories with the world. And I'm forever grateful. I just want to give another shout out to Catherine because she really is the reason that I started doing this work. And, I'm really honored that I've been able to work with her in the past few years and helping her write her book about youth activism, and then recently supporting her when they tried to do a mass open rescue and were faced with so much violence and brutality at the hands of the police in Australia. It was really, really horrible, but they're really making waves out there. Oh, so the question, I should repeat it in folks can hear. She's asking how to inspire people to go vegan in day-to-day life. So in day-to-day life, I like to focus on sharing animal stories. So I think the power of stories is just not really utilized enough in this movement. And especially having a sanctuary helps a lot. But I don't even think, you don't have to necessarily have a sanctuary. You can visit a sanctuary, go to vigils, find some sort of personal connection, an animal you have a connection with. And if you don't have that, you can even share the story of an animal that you saw a video of and you connected with online, and say, oh my God, I heard about this pig the other day named Lily who was rescued from a Smithfield factory farm, and I heard about all this different stuff. Or if you know the animal personally, you can be like, hey, I have a friend who's a chicken. She's one of my best friends in the whole world. And when I see you have a piece of her flesh on your plate, all I see is her. All I see is her in my mind on the kill floor. And, I don't blame you for that. I know that you're a victim of society just as much as everyone else, that we live in a society where this is normal. But when I see that, it makes me incredibly uncomfortable. It causes me a lot of grief. And I want you to come and meet this chicken and look her in the eyes and get to know her the way I have. And I just think things like that. Like, you don't have to attack anyone, but just make them connect with it. Because like I said in my talk, we do live in a nation of animal lovers. People don't want to see animals hurt. And I think when people really connect with it on a personal level, they will change. Yeah, so the question is, how many animals do I have at the sanctuary and of what kind? So at Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary, we have about 150 animals, 150 permanent residents. We've rescued more than that. We've rescued about 800 animals, but not all. Some of them have either passed away or been adopted out to loving forever homes. But currently we have 4 pigs. They're all meat pigs, so they're huge. They're several hundred pounds. We've got 2 cows, Rosa and Buddha. We have a turkey. We've got 5 ducks, 2 geese. We've got 2 quails, 2 sheep, 4 goats. We just got 3 new goats recently, so I'm still trying to remember that one. And then we have about 100 chickens. So the question is how I balance activism with school. So that's a really good question. I fortunately get to do school from home. So I go to a charter school program. So I have to go in and meet with my teacher once a week, and then I go in for a chemistry lab every other week. But for the most part, I get to stay home for all my schoolwork and kind of pick my own, manage my own schedule. And that's been really, really helpful the past few years since I've been at this school. And it is really hard to balance everything. I get up at 4 a.m. most mornings, and I work until the time I go to bed. I just kind of try to switch back and forth throughout the day. Like if I start getting bored of schoolwork, I move on to the activism, and then I do the activism until I'm like, all right, I really need to do schoolwork again. But yeah, it is definitely hard. But I think it's really, I love it all because it's animal rights that gives me a reason for living. And, I want to try to balance it all any way I can so I can keep fighting for these guys.